Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network, based in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Hello, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow, and this is the Larry Kudlow Show, and it is a great pleasure to be with you today. And let's see, you can hear us, live stream us on the internet. LarryKudlowShow.com, LarryKudlowShow.com. You can get us all across the country, around the world, throughout the solar system, including the Milky Way. And please catch us during the week. Fabulous Fox Business Network. Fox Business Network. Name of the show is Kudlow, Monday through Friday, 4 to 5 p.m. Love to have you visit us at 4. If you can't make it, you can text your favorite 9-year-old and she'll show you how to DVR the show. It's not hard. So, plenty to talk about today, and we have this Xi Jinping, Donald Trump summit, which I guess was the big news of the week, although lots of good economic news, really good American economic news. And we've got Steve Forbes and Art Laffer at the half hour, two of the best, both dear friends of mine going back. I don't know, it's probably 45 years now, if you can imagine. Stock market was sloppy yesterday, but gosh, it's strong. Dow's just short of 50,000. The S&P 500 breaking records. 7408 S&P 500. Really something. Anyway, it's very interesting to me. I get why Xi Jinping, as the head of Communist China, thinks he's dealing with a peer country, namely the United States of America. I understand that. But I want to make a point with all of the bravado that he creates and false promises and whatnot. Here's my favorite statistic. You want to compare the two economies. On a per capita basis, which is really if you're doing cross-country comparisons, you should look at it per capita, i.e. per person. On a per-person basis, the U.S. is $90,000 per person, per capita. $90,000, just about. A little more than that, actually. China, which obviously has a bigger population, I don't know what they are now, we're about 350 million, some odd. They're about 1.2 or 3 billion, some odd. On a per capita basis, they're under $14,000, okay? We are above 90,000 per capita. They are slightly less than 14,000. That tells you the difference. They're nowhere near us. Now, they have built up a huge military, and they are a very unbalanced economy that relying on cheap government-subsidized exports, unfair trading practices. They've been cheating for years. We never should have let them into the World Trade Organization back in the Clinton days. Their markets are not open the way ours are. That, of course, is why President Trump is campaigning hard for reciprocal trade. But my first point is how different the economies are. Theirs is a state-run socialist economy. Now, they had a few years in the 80s, maybe the early 90s, where they had a smidgen of free market reforms. They let the farmers share profits, and they let some IPOs, they let some entrepreneurship into their system. But in the last 20 years, it's been snuffed out. And Xi Jinping himself is probably the most statist, centralized, socialist president they've had, going back, I don't know, certainly into the 90s. So you get what you pay for. You know, the Chinese Communist Party runs the economy. We've learned throughout history, whether it was the Soviet Union or Cuba, North Korea, none of these places. Free market capitalism works. Socialism, communism never works. There's no incentives. There's no entrepreneurship. There's no genius. There's no brilliance. There's no experimentation. It's all run by the state. And besides the fact that we have a 7-fold lead over China in terms of our economy, just in recent years, China has suffered from a huge property real estate collapse. Their manufacturing is down. They're basically, they used to post numbers of 15 or 20% GDP. Now they're posting numbers of 5% or less. That tells you a lot because those are phony numbers. In fact, they started, I think it was this past year, maybe it was last year, when the job numbers came out, they were so poor, they stopped putting out the job numbers. That's one way to solve the problem. Just don't tell anybody. So it's very important. Now, this meeting between the two superpowers, China is a military menace. They're a military power. No question about that. Financially, they're very, very weak. Their banking system is weak. They manipulate their currency, and their economy is weak. The biggest thing that she wanted to talk about was, of course, Taiwan. He wants Communist China to take over Taiwan, and we do not. And God bless President Trump is keeping that promise. Now, we don't call it exactly independence. We just have a policy of what's been called for, 50 years, strategic ambiguity. Strategic ambiguity, however, favors an autonomous, independent Taiwan. And she asked President Trump directly, this is according to Mr. Trump, who spoke to the media afterwards. She asked him if he would keep it independent, and he just said there's one person that knows the answer to that, and that's me, and I'm not talking. And we will be selling them more and more arms. There's no question we will. So we gave up nothing. But the biggest issue for us in this was Iran. I think President and his team probably was hoping for some more help on Iran, but they're not going to get any. I mean, it's easy for China to say they want the Strait of Hormuz to be open, okay, and they said that, and so we agree on that. But that doesn't cost them anything, and right now, our embargo, our blockade is working beautifully, strangling Iran. And there'll be additional combat. Bombs will be dropping, I think, soon after this summit is over. We wanted perhaps China rather, to put a little heat on Iran, maybe to surrender. They're not going to, and they really don't have that much clout anymore. I mean, the thing that's so odd about China created Iran. China financed Iran by buying their oil. Roughly 90% of Iran's oil is sold to China, which amounts to about 40% of Chinese oil imports. I think the number is about 1.5 million barrels a day, something like that. And they get big discounts. China's always gotten big 25, 30% discounts. So instead of $100 a barrel, they'll get it for, $60, $65 a barrel. But the point I want to make is so important. It is China that was the Iranian financier. It was China's oil money that allowed Iran to build nukes, to build missiles, to finance terrorism throughout the Middle East and elsewhere, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis. China was the banker. None of that came up in this summit meeting because I think, fortunately, both heads of state, Trump and Xi, kept things on the calm side publicly. But I'm just saying, their statement, China's statement, at the end of the summit, the number one issue was Taiwan. The United States put out its own, and the number one issue was Iran. Now, there were some nicks and knacks. I say that we sent a powerhouse. I mean, we had something like 30 CEOs, major American corporate CEOs. Not that much was done on trade, so far as I know, at this stage. China may buy, 200 airplanes from Boeing. I think the original hope was something like 500, but that may be a work in progress. There'll be some improvement in agriculture, soybeans. American farmers will sell them our soybeans. China will import some of our oil and gas. That's a very good thing because it shows how powerful we are. We dominate world energy markets. In the first Trump term, I was on the trade team, the China trade team. Mnuchin, Lighthizer, Navarro, Wilbur Ross, all of us, we spent 2 years negotiating a big trade deal with them. But they didn't keep their end of the promise. I mean, intellectual property theft is still out there. Forced transfer of technology is still out there. Allocations of commodity purchases never met. Allocations of manufacturing purchases never met. China doesn't keep its word. Of course they don't. We know that. But we went through, and it was arduous, and the deal was signed in early 2020. But I learned a lot with all the constant meetings we had, including a couple of dinners where President Xi was at, President Trump. I think probably the best thing is, no fireworks, stability, no ratcheting up of tariffs at this point, kind of status quo. And I think from President Trump's standpoint, just having him on the world stage with Xi in Beijing with the pomp and all the pomp and ceremony is a good thing. It's an image-enhancing good thing. And for Xi, I'm sure for his audience, being with Trump is a good thing. And at the moment, the relationship is being managed calmly. We went through a lot of ups and downs a year ago, but things have quieted down. And we'll see where it leads. We don't know all that's happened yet. I think, however, the other side of the world is going to be much tougher. All right, my sense is we are fixing the U.S. government, military, the President Trump, the commander-in-chief, is getting ready for the final push in Iran. There will be combat. There will be bombing. The blockade will continue. We will relaunch Project Freedom that will reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is on its deathbed. No matter what their crazy mullahs, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, these are crazy people. These are gruesome people. This is like Nazism in the 80 or 90 years ago. But they are on their last legs, and we are about to launch the final push. And ironically, and I'll close with this for the moment, I think the final push was planned as Mr. Trump and his team traveled from Washington, D.C. to Beijing, and probably at the drawing board in Beijing, too. So it goes. Presidents never sleep. This one in particular. But I'm getting ready for the final push in Iran. As far as China goes, well, less than 14,000 per capita GDP. The U.S. more than 90,000. You draw your own conclusions, folks. I'm Kudlow. We'll take a quick break.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You know, on a happier note, besides worrying about China and its ambitions, we're produced numbers this week that show a booming American economy. I mean, the word resilient is used a lot. I would substitute the word boom for the word resilient. I mean, a couple numbers. First of all, we had gigantic retail sales, which is now growing at over 9% at an annual rate for the past 3 months. And then yesterday we had big numbers for manufacturing, industrial production, but manufacturing up 0.6 in April, 4.5% annually for the last 3 months. These are adjusted for inflation. Business equipment, 8% for the last 3 months, annualized rate. These are huge numbers. What you're seeing is both the supply side or the business side of the economy is booming, and the consumer side, the retail side, is also booming. Consumer demand. Now, I know we've had the hike in energy prices. I get that. Gasoline prices have gone from less than $3 to about $4.50 nationwide. I understand that. I'm not denying it or trying to gloss over it. And it's not a fabulous thing, and it may be hurting some people, okay? I feel your pain in that sense. But it's not killing the economy. It is not killing the economy. And we're not experiencing supply shocks. There are supply shocks, oil supply shocks in other parts of the world, including China and Europe. But the U.S. is not experiencing a supply shock. We have ready and available oil. The really important point. I know the price is up, but by the way, it turns out the tax refunds are coming in at about $175 billion. They were estimated initially at $100 billion, so that may be covering part of it. So eat your heart out, Xi Jinping. We have huge economic growth in the United States. All right, break. And Art Laffer and Steve Forbes coming up.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So I just want to repeat the number that we had earlier, comparing USA economy and China's economy. On a per capita basis, the United States is slightly over $90,000 per person. China is slightly under $14,000 per person. China is in a virtual recession, and even despite oil prices, the United States is posting unbelievable numbers. By the way, the Atlanta Federal Reserve GDP now has now got 4% growth in the second quarter after better than 2% growth in the first quarter. So let us bring in two very distinguished economics professors and dear friends of mine. Art Laffer is the chairman and chief economist of Laffer Associates. He is a Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient. I was in the room when he got it. His latest book is The Trump Economic Miracle and the Plan to Unleash Prosperity Again, co-authored with Steve Moore, who will be with us later in the show, and the great Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. Steve's latest book, Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. Gentlemen, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. Every now and then, it's fun. Steve Forbes, let me begin with you. Knowing your interest in foreign policy, what'd you make of this Trump-Xi so-called summit in Beijing?
Well, I think the key thing is what didn't happen. The trade deals, that's going to have to come later. But the big thing is that, Larry, is what President Trump does when he gets home. Xi has pushed, as you know, very hard on Taiwan. The president, I'm sure, tried to be polite, but the key thing he has to do now to make sure there's no ambiguity about where Taiwan stands is to go ahead with that $14 billion arms sale that has been approved. It's still sitting on the president's desk. He should say that we've been doing arms sales to Taiwan for 50 years since normalization of relations. That's part of that pattern. That sale is going ahead. Xi's trying to send it off the road into a ditch. The president should go ahead with that. The other thing the president should do, and they've hinted at it with the Pentagon, is to reassure Asian allies by going ahead with the idea of building some of our naval ships in South Korean and Japanese naval yards, where their shipbuilding techniques, sadly, in many ways, are far ahead of ours. You do that reassures the Asian allies. We're not going to take a powder on the region. You go ahead with that arms sales. You have no ambiguity about Trump abandoning Taiwan.
I don't think he will. I mean, he's just holding back. I don't think he will at all. In fact, I think, it's interesting, Steve. I'll be right with you in a second.
Yeah.
Interesting, Steve. A lot of people thought President Trump might bend to Xi on Taiwan, but there's no evidence of that. None.
No, and just to make sure Xi doesn't misinterpret, some people like to hear what they want to hear. Going ahead with that arms sale, I think, would just make it very clear nothing's changed.
Yes, no, I agree 100% on that, 100%. Art Laffer, way back in the last century, you were involved in some of the early China work. Listen, we all go back back into the last century, so it's okay. But their economy, I would argue their economy is deteriorating. And I can use numbers, but numbers probably don't mean anything in China. I mean, when they get a bad number, they just don't post the number anymore. But on a per capita basis, we have a 7-fold larger economy than they do. But they've been in a slump or recession or a property bust for years. So I don't know how they get off thinking, that they're puffed up and they're this great superpower.
I totally agree. Xi has changed the structure of Chinese policies dramatically, and all for the worse.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back to 1970, China was a hermit kingdom there. They've grown something like 66-fold in real GDP per person, while we grew 5 or 6-fold. I mean, they were the miracle supply side. They found money. They opened up trade. They cut taxes dramatically. And Xi has, in the last 5-6 years, reversed all of those policies. He's become a threat to business, to private enterprise. And I really think that what happened to Japan in 1989 is happening to China right now. And that in 10 or 15 years, China will not be nearly the power it is today. I think there's been a complete reversal. And that's really sad because, we should be the best trading partners China ever had and vice versa. But I don't think that's in the cards.
It's interesting. Listen, I saw it, Art, when I was on the China trade team in Trump's first term, and I saw it. Despite one or two people that were genuine reformers, all the others that she sent to various trade meetings, and we had so many of them in Washington and Beijing, one after another, they're a bunch of statist communist thugs. That's all they were. In fact, the communist thugs were sent to make sure that the one or two reformers didn't get away with anything. Didn't make any promises they couldn't keep. So it's you, and it looks like the economic story there is getting worse, Art. I mean, they don't fess up exactly the numbers, right? But they used to post 15% GDP plus. Now they're posting 5%, and it's a lot lower than that.
And it's descending, not ascending. It's
Yeah.
Xi is in a sinking ship, and it's going to take a long time to sink. But it's really very sad to see what he's done, because it was such a miracle there. It was like Chile in South America, just this explosion and then the drop. Now, Chile's come back again, but there's no chance that China does. None. I mean, they're just on the wrong track, and Xi is just pushing his authoritarian rule over the private sector. And it is really tragic, because we could be great partners with China, and that's not going to happen, I don't think.
I saw somebody, I'm not sure who it was, but one of the market analysts, who covers China and the international stocks. Anyway, the Chinese stock market hasn't moved in over 5 years. It's just flat pancake. And the U.S. stock market has been booming, for a number of and continues to boom, I might add. In fact, our whole economy looks like it's booming, Arthur. I mean, it is. Atlanta GDP now 4% in the second quarter. You saw the production and manufacturing numbers out yesterday, and retail sales the day before. I know oil prices are high, although oil's available, gasoline is available. It's not a supply shock, but it's a price adjustment. But whatever, if we're booming.
Well, we've got the policies, Larry. I mean, the president has put in a phenomenal set of policies across the board, the BBB, the tax cuts, all of that stuff. And now with Kevin Warsham at the Fed, I think the Fed's going to be a lot better. And then looking at this stuff, the trade policies that Trump is doing and negotiating with, I think are all in phenomenal situation for a really expansive U.S. economy for a number of years to come.
Yes, I hope so. Steve Forbes, let me just go back to the Xi thing, because each country put out its own statement, so there was no, joint communique, as there sometimes is after these things. But anyway, each country put out its own. The top of the list for China's communique or statement was Taiwan, as we discussed a few moments ago. The top of our list was Iran. Now, here's the thing, Steve. China's saying, okay, and it's kind of a freebie. They're saying, yeah, we agree the Strait of Hormuz should be reopened. We agree, and there should not be a toll. Okay, that's pretty easy for them to say, right? But they are the ones who helped create Iran, because they buy 90% of Iran's oil exports, and therefore they are the banker and the financier of the Iran attempts at nuclear weapons and missiles and ICBMs and sponsorship of terror in Hezbollah and Hamas and Houthis and all the rest of it. Do you follow? I mean, I gotta love China's chutzpah, okay, or chutzpah, whatever the right word is. They're the ones who finance Iran. You could say they created Iran. Now they're saying, oh yeah, let's open up the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, I just find that incredible.
Well, two things on that. One, it underscores why the sooner we get back to doing what we were doing before this ceasefire, which I think was a major mistake, go back, complete those targets, take out that regime. The army will move against the regime if it feels we're not going to pull the rug out from under them. But also talking about, gee, China, it's great you love the international traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, and we believe the same thing for the South China Sea. They've been trying to put in man-made military islands to control the South China Sea, and we should make a statement again. Jefferson was right, freedom of navigation, and maybe we'll put our own man-made island and call it the Trump Island in the South China Sea, and make very clear that's going to remain an open waterway, just as the Strait of Hormuz is going to be an open waterway, period.
You know, Steve, I've already changed the Persian Gulf to the Trump Gulf. Now we have the Gulf of America. I had an admiral on the TV show who said I should stop calling it the Persian Gulf. I should call it the Arabian Gulf, which, by the way, I might be okay with the Arabian Gulf. But I don't know. I rethought about it. So
how about the Laffer Kudlow Gulf?
No,
Supply side Gulf.
Supply side Gulf.
Freedom. We believe in freedom. We believe in growth. You and Arthur helped save civilization in the early 80s, late 70s. Got to do it again. So,
Steve Forbes, you are part and parcel.
Isn't he wonderful? Isn't he wonderful, Larry? He's just terrific.
He is part and parcel of that. We both backed you for Arthur and I both backed you for president.
100%.
Both times. I still think your platform would work. I mean, actually, it's funny. Trump winds up moving the ball in your direction, and not quite on every area, but certainly on taxes and regulations. But you were there first a good many years ago.
I learned from the best. We're talking to the two of them now. I am.
Well, I learned from the best also. How about, let's take a break. I want to talk about a bunch of other things. We got interest rate issues. We got Federal Reserve. We got Kevin Warsh coming in. You guys are both experts on that. And we got some politics to cover as well. Folks, if you hadn't guessed, we are two of the greatest of the great. I just want to say that, both of whom have taught me enormously down through the years. Art Laffer, number one. Steve Forbes, number two. In no particular order. I'm Kudlow. Will all three of us be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're going to continue the conversation with two of my dearest friends and literally smartest people I know, Dr. Arthur Laffer, who was a Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient. God bless, I was in the Oval Office when he got it from President Trump. Arthur's latest book with Steve Morris, Trump Economic Miracle. And Steve Forbes, whom I've known all these years, backed him for president twice. He and I, going way back in the early 90s, helped get a big fat tax cut and a gubernatorial win from Christine Todd Whitman, who it turned out, Steve, really when you scratch that whole story, John Whitman became the devout supply sider. The late John Whitman, who was a lovely guy. She kind of got cold feet after the first term, but let's not go there. Anyway, Steve's...
Well, that was the last time New Jersey did something right on taxes 30 years ago.
No, that's right. You and I worked on it. Paul Gigot was shilling for us in the paper. It was great stuff. Anyway, Steve, of course, chairman, editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, and his latest book is Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. So, fellas, a few moments. Bond yields are rising globally, actually. A lot of it's tied to the energy story. And the CPI is, we got a CPI. So the 12-month CPI top line, 3.8%. That includes energy. The core CPI, 2.8% over the past year. It's not the worst thing in the world. Kevin Warsh has taken over at the Fed. Steve Forbes, what do you want to see him do? I mean, it's not going to be easy, but what do you think you should focus on?
I think he should focus right away after the swearing in that the Federal Reserve does not believe that prosperity causes inflation and that there's going to put the forces in place to change the Fed's economic models. The rest of the world won't pay attention. Inside, that'll be a hydrogen bomb, a good one. We're going to clean out the debris of the past that has held America back and get some sensible models in. And then things like interest rates, you could say, will start to take care of themselves. That's an important point. If he articulates that in, let's say, early speeches or maybe his first major speech, whatever, that will have an important effect on economic policies all around the world, including central bankers. But, you haven't had anybody say that. Now, President Trump says that, all right, and says it very eloquently, but
but it doesn't seem to spread beyond that. I mean, Warsh can really help Trump and the whole pro-growth supply-side movement.
Yes, he could have the same impact, Warsh, that Reagan did in the early 80s with tax cuts, which were imitated by one degree or another with 50 countries around the world. If he starts to say central bank is now going to pay attention to the real economy, is going to not believe prosperity causes inflation, and you do that and start to pay attention to values of currencies, which none of them talk about, you start to do that, that's going to start to have an impact in the next few years on central banking everywhere and on the economics profession.
You know, Arthur, there's no reason why central bankers can't, take prominent positions on economic policy. I mean, after World War II, for example, during and after World War II, Mariner Eccles, who was a pal of FDR's, was a devout Keynesian, Art, and he argued that again and again and again. They didn't even want to replace him. So it'll be interesting if Kevin Warsh goes down that road.
Yeah, well, Kevin Warsh should be our modern day Paul Volcker. Without Volcker, Reagan would have been not nearly as effective as he was. And I agree with Steve 100% that prosperity does not cause inflation. That's just plain silly. But the other side of the coin is what you need to do is get a spot commodity price index and stabilize it over the long run to bring an inflationless world. I think this 2% stuff per year doesn't make sense. I would like to see the dollar stable in value. And the way Volcker did it was, if there's too much inflation, what you do is you sell bonds in the open market and you shrink the monetary base, you shrink the balance sheet, and that way you can really control inflation for the long run. So it's not only discarding the bad, which Steve is 100% right on, it's also adopting the good, which is going back to a price rule, monetary policy.
And the nice thing, the way Art puts it, spot commodity index, is it can disguise return to a gold standard, but not using the word gold, so people don't get all frizzled up.
Well, I was waiting for those two words, price rule. I mean, that's, listen, in the 80s, Wayne Angel pushed the price rule, remember? You got to give him he never got enough credit for it. People thought he was an eccentric. He wasn't. He was a very smart economist and, I might add, commodities trader. Alan Greenspan did until the end, until his last term. I mean, Greenspan would go in front of Congress and talk about the gold price, what it meant, why it shouldn't be soaring. It's very interesting. It's not that long ago that price rules were in vogue. And you're right, Art. You buy bonds, you're increasing the base. If you sell bonds, you're reducing the base. Should he sell bonds now?
Yes. We've got an inflation issue today. Now, if the price of oil comes way down, you may want to mitigate that and not sell so many. But, we need to get control of that. Now, it took Volcker probably a year and a half to get control of the Fed when he first came in. It will not be easy for Kevin Warsh to get the cooperation of the rest of the board right away. It just won't be easy for him. But he should start on that process just the way Volcker did it when he was first appointed. Just take your time and get it right. And if he does that, we are in for a long prosperity. There's nothing more important than price stability, as you two have taught me over the years. It's just the key. It's a sine qua non of prosperity, stable, valued currency.
Yeah, we don't hit 2% anyway. I mean, Jay Powell's nowhere near 2%. I don't know when was the last time we had 2%. It was probably in the 1990s. Anyway, gentlemen, I'm most grateful. Thank you so much. Art Laffer, the best of the best. Steve Forbes, the best of the best. Doesn't get any better than that, folks, for you and me. Anyway, we will take a break, and we'll keep the economic beat up with John Carney and Joe LaVorgna. I'm Kudlow.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So we were talking with Art Laffer and Steve Forbes about Kevin Warsh taking over the Fed and how important that's going to be in terms of supply-side reforms and a price rule for price stability, monetary stability, currency stability. But wait a second. Will the Fed ever let Kevin Warsh take over the Fed? I mean, he's been confirmed by the Senate on a party line vote. But there seems to be something going on here. Powell forever. Fed declares Powell temporary chair, even though Warsh has been confirmed. That's a headline from John Carney at Breitbart. So let's talk to John Carney, Breitbart news editor for economics and finance and co-author of the great daily Breitbart Business Digest. John, what is going on here? What's happened? Are they trying to take it away from him?
It was an extraordinary Friday news dump, Larry. 5 p.m. on Friday, the Fed lets us know that the Fed board has voted to keep Powell on, at least for a little while. I guess Kevin Warsh has not been sworn in yet by the president because the president was in China. It seems unnecessary. There's at the very least, there's a vice chair of the Fed. He's still vice chair, Philip Jefferson. He could run the meetings if they had to have an emergency meeting over the weekend. But the Fed decided on its own that it could declare Jerome Powell the chair pro temp for until Warsh is confirmed, which is not in keeping with they said this is consistent with past practice, but it's not. When Greenspan was between terms, he got to be chair pro temp. So did Powell between his two terms. But keeping in place a chair who the president has intentionally, not renominated, seems both a power grab on their part and I think an attempt to set precedent for the future so that they can say, no, well, this is the way we do things. We get to choose if there's a gap between the chairman. We get to choose who runs it.
Well, I would think the trick here is to get Warsh sworn in immediately.
Yeah, so the president should get Warsh sworn in. I mean, they can do it over the weekend.
Monday.
They can do it. Yeah, they can do it they could have done it on the tarmac, I think, as soon as the president returns. But yeah, get him sworn in right away. Don't let this go on. He's been confirmed. It's just a ceremony now, and the president, signing the final papers. They should do that immediately.
Well, I'll say you gotta watch these Fed guys. I mean, is it like it's almost like a cabal, an anti-Trump cabal led by Jay Powell, and some of these. Let me just ask, was there a vote taken to make him pro tem, chairman pro tem? Was actual board voted on this?
The board voted.
What was the vote?
So two governors voted. One voted against it and one abstained. So Stephen Myron voted against this, and Mickey Bowman said she was abstaining. Their objection in particular was that the way the Fed did this, Powell would, if for some reason Warsh was not confirmed for a week or a month, if there was, then Powell would just stay on forever. Bowman Myron asked there to be a time limit, so that the Fed would revisit it a week from now. That there shouldn't be an open-ended temporary chairmanship, and they also put in there they created a little dissent statement in which they said, maybe if it doesn't happen in a week, we should consult the president. After all, the chairman is supposed to be somebody appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. In the past, when they've appointed chairman pro tem, it has been with either the very explicit endorsement of the president or an implicit endorsement where the president was happy with the chairman. So when Volcker was leaving, and he decided he was leaving, Reagan appointed Greenspan. Volcker served for a couple days after his chairmanship ended, but it was very clear that Reagan had endorsed that. This is quite different. This is them doing it, I think, to spite Trump. And frankly, I wonder if they're almost tempting Trump to try to use this as a way to remove Powell, because it strikes me as illegal. I don't think it's authorized by the law for them to appoint their own, the outgoing guy on their own, no consultation with the president. It's not in the statute, and it's not really in the precedent.
How did Chris Waller vote on this?
As far as I can tell, he voted for it. I didn't see a roll call, but the only note of people not voting for it were these two. Look, I can forgive some of the people who might have voted for it, in that they're probably trying to tone down the Fed. It's become very divided. We had 3 dissents on a hawkish side at the last Fed meeting and 1 on the dovish side. So 4 dissents. They're probably looking for some to reform a consensus, but this was not a good way to do it.
There's going to be hand-to-hand combat. Have we ever seen? Right. We'd have boxing ring. We could set it up, put it on YouTube, let everybody watch. By the way, the Federal Reserve Board, as it's presently constituted, with Chairman Pro Tem Jay Powell, they don't really acknowledge that Trump is president, do they? It's like, who's he? He's the commander-in-chief. He appoints us. Nah, they don't really deal with that. I mean, it's just little fun and games, right? So Kevin Warsh will be the Fed chair as soon as they can swear him in. I'm sure President Trump will get it done immediately. But it's just, it's just a little whacks that they take at Trump. It's just really simple. It's like a rump board. That's what it is.
It's also, it really defies this idea that they are not involved in politics.
Yes.
Right? They say, no, we're independent, we're above politics. But then they do petty things like this that send a message that they have decided that they don't want to be above politics anymore. They want to be right in the mix.
What a strange story. All right. John Carney, thanks for that update. It was really something. Maybe, hand-to-hand combat at the Fed. Anyway, John Carney's co-author of Breitbart Business Digest. You should read it every day. Thanks, John. Appreciate it very much. Folks, we'll take a quick break. Other side of the break is Joe LaVorgna, former counselor to the Treasury Secretary and dear friend, and he's back on Wall Street, and he'll be here to talk about the economy. I'm Kudlow. Please stick around.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So my pal, Joe LaVorgna, he's back on Wall Street, but he did serve nearly 2 years as counselor to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and he was our chief economist at the White House National Economic Council in the first term when I was directing. And he's back, tanned, rested, and ready. Joe, first question is, what's going to happen to interest rates? The headline in the Journal this morning, global rates are going up.
Yes, global rates are going up. It's not just in the U.S. Rates in Japan, which, Larry, have led a lot of this move higher in global yields. Their rates went up more this past week than in the U.S. And then, of course, the U.K., which has got significant political issues, their rates have gone up. So, yeah, it's a higher rate story in the short term. And there is concern, as you know, Larry, about inflation. Both CPI, consumer prices, and the producer prices were much higher than expected. So it seems to be a confluence of factor, inflation, and then tighter money in Japan and elsewhere, and a real fear that rates could push higher.
So what happens if the Strait of Hormuz is open? All right, it's not at the moment. I get that. Prices hovering, WTI above and below $100, Brent a little higher. But do rates come down? The inflation rate will come down. Gasoline prices will come down. It may not come down as fast as we might hope, but the likelihood is this is a short term. Or do you think the inflation is a longer term problem?
That's an excellent question, which I wrestle with, Larry. As you know, before the crisis in the Middle East, like you, I was a big believer in the disinflationary boom, and that's still going on in the backdrop given the significant capital expenditures and the rising productivity, which over time should lead to much faster wages. It's what we saw during the first Trump term and, of course, during the late 90s under Bill Clinton. I do expect inflation to move lower, but I'm not sure, Larry, if it's going to happen in the short term. And as you said, it depends much on what happens in the Middle East and those supply chains, both for energy and, of course, other importing commodities. That's going to be the driving factor, Larry. And, of course, Kevin Warsh, who believes, I think will be a great Fed chair, who believes in this disinflation story, is going to probably have to push back against some of his colleagues who will be voting this year, who actually would probably want to raise rates at some point, given the fact they were displeased. There was an easing bias this month or last month from the Fed.
Why would you raise, if you know it's temporary, why would you raise rates? I think that would just create a lot of confusion.
It would, I guess. Yeah. Well, the story would be, Larry, that the benefits of the capital deepening AI tech boom or in the short term is actually adding to demand and absorbing existing supply. It's pushing up energy costs, that it's only longer term over the next several years this will play out. At least this would be the argument. And in the short term, with inflation having been above target for so long, in part because the Fed accommodated a massive unnecessary fiscal stimulus we got in 21, inflation expectations edge higher, and then the Fed gets worried, so that's why they want to try to arrest this potential spiral. That would be the reason why they would hike or talk about hiking.
Well, so numbers came out, I guess, last week or 10 days ago. Non-farm productivity, 4-quarter change, 2.9%. It's a really strong number. And therefore, unit labor costs, right, wages less compensation, less productivity, are only 1.2%. And to some extent, that's like the base inflation rate in the economy, isn't it? Or certainly the basic wage inflation rate. And that's right. That's not impacted. I mean, what you get there is you get the productivity kicker, but you don't really. It's not really impacted by the energy story, which has not crept into wages yet. So I just, I just think it would be a big mistake for the Fed to start fine tuning like that. I mean, I really think that'd be a mistake.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you raise an excellent point. The labor cost story is still very contained, and the Fed looks at that. The issue would be, I guess, Larry, if they started to see nominal wages accelerate, do the Phillips curvers on the board want to then push too tight, and that's where Kevin is going to, I think, be able to make a persuasive case, or at least try to get the committee not to be aggressive, perhaps in the short term. Unfortunately, the case for rate cuts right now just isn't there, and I think that was the case a few months ago. It's not there at the moment. But yes, I think probably tightening in the very near term is premature, and that's also a reason why, Larry, I should add why the market sold off this week. The futures market added about a little more than one full rate hike as the Fed's next move, but the market's not really expecting that to happen until June of 27.
Well, I think the Fed should do nothing, Joe. Just do nothing. I was talking earlier with Art Laffer and Steve Forbes, and Kevin's got to settle in. Kevin Warsh, he's got to be sworn in. By the way, they're putting in Jay Powell in the meantime, which is so crazy. Yeah, we were just talking about that with John Carney. But putting that aside, he's got to get sworn in. He's got to sort of get a lay of the land. He's got to get his own team together. He's got to give a few early speeches, I suppose. I mean, I think he needs to have a longer range view of price stability and economic growth.
Absolutely. And to his credit, Larry, he's talked about, downplaying the concept of forward guidance and talking all the time about the forecast, which I think it's important the Fed to be transparent and to be open where it can, but also know where it can fall short. And Kevin, I think, understands that. And you're right. If he has a longer-term approach, and I'm sure you'll see him and tell him, and if I see him, I'll do it as well. But I think he'll handle it okay. The issue is going to be, Larry, as you said earlier, is when is the Strait open? When do we get back to normal?
Yeah.
And is that downslope in futures oil prices, is it accurate? If it is, you're right, then things will be temporary. The economy will accelerate late in the year, and 27 will be that boom maybe that we thought would happen in 26, but perhaps it's got pushed out just a little bit into 27.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. You got basic GDP in the first quarter was 2.5%, C plus I. And the Atlanta Fed's posting 4% for the second quarter. Now that moves around when the data comes in. But you got a very strong economy, Joe LaVorgna.
No, you can. Yeah, absolutely. I think that the Atlanta Fed, I think the second quarter 4% number seems a bit too high to me because more inflation's running. Maybe push more back into the first quarter. Fourth quarter last year, I think, will be revised up. But yes, you're right. I mean, the economy still is performing extraordinarily well. And Larry, that does speak to deregulation, low tax rates, supply side policies, and a general certain optimism that the U.S. is the most dynamic economy in the world. Its labor market's the most flexible. Yeah, so look, I would love to have growth surprise to the upside. It'd be a wonderful thing.
Listen, on the oil thing, we're not experiencing a supply shock. We have plenty of oil and gasoline in this country. Other places have a supply problem. We don't. We're getting a price adjustment. Okay, that's not nothing. $4.50 gasoline. I understand that can hurt some families, but it's not like in the 70s we had a supply shock because of bad economic policies and bad energy policies in general, and wage and price controls and all that. We don't have that now. So it's more expensive to drive a car. I get that, and a truck and so forth. But at least oil's there, gasoline's there, diesel's there. Guess we lost him. I didn't know. Anyway, Joe LaVorgna, I guess I lost you in the ether zone. Thank you for coming on. Congratulations on your government service. We're going to talk to Bret Baier, Fox News' Bret Baier, about his new book. Please stick around, folks. The Case for America. I love that.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So, Bret Baier, Fox News host of Special Report with Bret Baier, he's chief political anchor of Fox News. 6 New York Times bestsellers, pretty impressive. His latest, The Case for America, an argument on behalf of our nation, a thoughtful defense of our history, values, and national character in divisive times. Well, you're the best newsman in all of news, and it's so lovely to see somebody defending America, besides me. But Bret Baier, welcome back. So I could talk to you about some politics, but I want to talk to you about the book. This is a gem of a book, and people should go out and get it. When you came on the TV show, we talked about freedom. I want to talk about freedom in a minute, but I want to talk about unity. Unity, which seems so hard. You're arguing in the book that America does, in fact, choose unity. Can you tell us a wee bit about that?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks to the people that bought the book already. It turned out to be a #1 New York Times bestseller this week, and that's a real honor for me, and a book about history, And, unity is in our name, in United. And it goes back to the beginning and the Declaration of Independence. I think that dissent is baked in the cake. We honor dissent. We really look to it to define who we are. But bringing the country together is the challenge. It takes leadership. And in the book, I have specific examples of leaders, not only the 6 presidents I wrote about, but also, current voices talking about reaching across the aisle and trying to get things done. You would think in today's day and age, we're so partisan, so divided, but we've been really dark places in our history before. And the unique American character is that the pendulum swings, and we figure out how to go forward and get over some of the big divisions.
You know, Bret, they're all important points, but it's the most divided I think I've seen it, maybe since the Vietnam War, maybe.
Yeah,
because
that's true. I mean,
it's just
you
like,
look at social media.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like everything to do with Trump automatically spawns, the Trump derangement syndrome. And we'll get through this. We are getting through it. But it just seems awfully divided right now, awfully divided. How about...
It does. And I will say there is some, glimmer of hope up on Capitol Hill. And you and I have talked about this before. I had this thing, Common Ground, on the show. And I have a podcast called Common Ground where I bring Democrats and Republicans together to talk about what they're working on. There are more and more of those instances. There are more characters that are stepping up for specific things that they want to talk about. But, it takes leadership. It takes leadership not only on the opposition side, it takes leadership from the president, obviously, and the way he talks about things. He's a unique character. We're probably, as you know better than anybody, we're probably never going to see a politician like Donald J. Trump ever again. And for all his successes, people focus, his supporters, on the stuff he's doing, and the opposition and the people who have TDS focus on what he says and what he tweets or puts on True Social and how he talks about things as a New York real estate developer. So I agree with you. There is a huge divide. But you look back, Vietnam, you look at the race riots, you look at, go back to after the Civil War, where were it not for President Ulysses S. Grant, we would be falling back into a second Civil War at that time.
My favorite.
We almost didn't get off the starting line if George Washington is not in the Constitutional Convention. And I kind of go into that and some of the specific stories in this book, and I think that's why it's taken off. It gives people a little ammo as you get to the America 250 to say, hey, you know what? We have a pretty good place here. We got to fight for it.
Music to my ears. You said Ulysses S. Grant because you know how much I love him.
I know. I know you do.
I'm just saying. My softest spot for this book, my favorite spot for this book, is the freedom and the Declaration of Independence. I just think that's it's the most important sentence in history, but it's still right. It still characterizes this country.
It really does. And it's really the most important thing that we have. If you go to any country, and I literally just landed a few hours ago from China after being there this week for the summit. I'm really happy to be home, Larry. I think that, you go around the world and then you come back home and you realize the freedoms that we have. You could pick up and move from where you are and go to another city in the middle of the country, pick up, do something totally different, and start a new life. It doesn't happen everywhere. The freedom to express ourselves. We can dissent. We can be, look at all the stuff that we see online that people are, very adamant and loud, and they can be that way. It doesn't happen everywhere. So I think the freedom part is really, really important. And as we get to this celebration of 250, I think that's the line. That's that opening line is the line that we should be focused on.
I thought so. That's, when you were on the TV show a few weeks back, I felt then, and I've gone back and read the book, and I just think that's the most wonderful part. You're on number one in the New York Times again, which is phenomenal, I might add. Congratulations. Phenomenal. But I think part of it, Bret, I'm just guessing here, people want to hear a case for America. How about that? They want to hear it, and you're giving it to them. I
think there's a hunger out there. I really do. And I travel the country and I give speeches, and there is this hunger like, we can be better. Let's figure out how to lift the country up instead of talk it down. There's a lot of talking it down. You know, when you go on social media, some of that stuff that's generated is from other countries that's put into our bloodstream, and it gets to our young people. I think, look, you read this book, at the end of it, you feel good. It's not like I'm sanitizing America. I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm not looking through rose-colored glasses. We have big problems. But we just got to remember who we are, number one, and all the good things we've got. When the King of England, when King Charles comes in, gives this speech in Congress, Democrats and Republicans standing up, giving him standing ovations, and his basic message is, congratulations on 250 of Declaration from us. Remember that you are uniquely American, optimistic, forward-leaning, and looking to the future. I mean, that's pretty amazing. The King of England telling us to be more American. And he's right.
Yes, very good. Bret Baier, you're an optimist.
I am.
You are. I think it comes through in your writings, and I think it comes through in this book, and I think it's fabulous that you're an optimist. Honestly, I want to congratulate. I know you're busy. I know you're probably exhausted from the long trip to China coming back. We appreciate your time. We'll sell some more books for you. The Case for America, folks, an argument on behalf of our nation, a thoughtful defense of our history, values, and national character in divisive times by the great Bret Baier, Fox News top newsman. Thank you, Bret. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry.
See you. Okay. All right, folks, we'll take a break. On the other side, we're going to have Ambassador Robert O'Brien, National Security, talk a little more about China, which does not have any of the freedoms that Bret Baier is talking about. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So I want to talk some more about the summit, the Beijing summit, but I'm also interested in the next steps in Iran. I have a feeling that we're going to resume combat for a variety of reasons, including reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Anyway, let's bring in our great friend, Ambassador Robert O'Brien, former National Security Advisor and now Chairman of American Global Strategies. Robert, thank you, as always, for helping out. A quick thought. We've been talking a little bit about Beijing, but you have a quick thought on the Beijing story? It's like she wanted to talk about Taiwan and President Trump wanted to talk about Iran. So it's kind of a standoff and no big fireworks, I can tell.
No, I think the Beijing visit was brilliant. It reminded me of the Brezhnev-Nixon summits in days of yore. People thought that the president was going to go surrender to the Chinese. He was going to give them all kinds of goodies and let the Communist Party off the hook. He did none of that. He was very friendly, which we should be with a major adversary, and he was very, very, very kind and complimentary of Xi, but he gave them nothing. All the tariffs remain in place. All the sanctions remain in place. He brought up Jimmy Lai and asked Xi to let Jimmy Lai come home. Xi's keeping Lai for now, which is unfortunate. But the president was very cordial. He won the world when you're dealing with world leaders, but he gave up nothing. And it was so I think from that standpoint, it was a very good couple of days for America.
Robert, do you think President Trump will follow through and complete the military sales to Taiwan?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the big reason for that is there are a number of independent reasons, but one is the president wants to promote the U.S. military-industrial base. The way to do that is to sell our weapons overseas, and Taiwan is a big buyer. So that reduces our trade deficit with the Taiwanese. It creates American jobs here at home with the men and women who are working on our defense factories. And so, of course, he'll sell those weapons to the Taiwanese. And moreover, it has the advantage of deterring Xi Jinping from invading Taiwan.
Absolutely. That's a good point, by the way. Boosting it's consistent with his whole America first and reciprocity. You're right. Boosting our military-industrial base and trade. I mean, we'll sell Taiwan military stuff, arms, and we'll sell China some oil if they want it. Yep. Why not? I know.
Those are American strengths. Why would we take our industries that are strong off the market because the Chinese want us to? If our allies want to buy Patriot missiles and F-35 aircraft from us, and that's what we make well, and that's how we reduce our trade deficit worldwide with our trading partners, why would we not sell that to them?
I love that. That's great point. Come to Iran. Is the bombing going to restart more combat and restart this Project Freedom, which only lasted about a day or two, for opening the Strait of Hormuz? I had the sense, Robert O'Brien, that even going to Beijing, the president meeting with national security advisors and military advisors, there's a lot that we don't know yet about plans. And he said something when he was in his Truth Social. He mentioned about continuing the bombing of Iran. I mean, how do you see that?
Look, I would expect so, Larry. The president has been you and I have talked about this the past couple of weeks. The president has been very generous and very patient with the Iranians. And I hope that patience has run out. They've been President Trump calls it tapping him along. They've been tapping him along with these negotiations. According to the president, they agree to something one day and go back on it the next, which is right out of the Iranian playbook to extend and pretend on these negotiations. They want to buy time for regime survival and to rebuild their military. And they want to sell oil in the meantime and make money for the regime. We need to put a stop to this. We have a once-in-a-generation chance to stop this horrible regime. It's like a Gestapo fascist regime, killing their own people, killing Israelis, killing Americans, getting away with it for 57 years. That has to end. And we destroyed and degraded their military. It's now time to do that to their economy and make it very difficult for the regime ever to rebuild. The missiles, the drones, the nuclear program that put the whole world at risk.
In the Truth Social, I just pulled it up a couple days ago. He was writing about all-time high stock markets, military victory, thriving relationship in Venezuela. Then he writes, Robert, the military decimation of Iran, and then in parens he puts to be continued, ! Close parens. Seems like he clearly wanted to make a point right there.
No, 100%. Again, he's been giving the Iranians chances since the negotiations in Geneva before the military operations began, when he sent Kushner and Witkoff to Geneva to negotiate with these guys. He's told them there are three things, Larry. End your nuclear program, end your missile program, and stop funding Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis. And we can have peace, and you can stay in power, and you can sell your oil. But the Iranians are refusing to do any of those three things, and instead they're trying to delay things, hoping that they get a Kamala Harris or a AOC or a Pritzker or some Gavin Newsom, a malleable Democrat that they can empower in 28 so that they can go back to their old ways. That's not going to happen. President Trump has another 2.5 years in office. He's not going to get delayed and extended and stonewalled the way the Iranians are used to. And look, my personal belief is the sooner we end this, the better. And I think we can end it very soon because they've got no air defenses. We've got total air supremacy, Larry. Mm-hmm. And so now is the time to just bomb these guys back into the Stone Age if they won't negotiate in good faith.
Which they never will. They never will.
No.
They're just crazy people. I mean,
the president said that they're lunatics and they're motivated by religious fervor, and they want to, they believe we're the great Satan, and they believe Israel's the little Satan, and they want to destroy us with every bone in their body. And that's not the Iranian people. The Iranian people are good people. We have tons of Iranians here who are great Americans. They want freedom for their country. But the 100,000 members of the Revolutionary Guard who are motivated by this religious fervor and this lunatic ideology, they have to be stopped. And it's time for Israel and Americans to put an end to this story and stop them now.
Robert, one thing that wasn't clear, the president didn't speak to it directly, but Iran was saying they sent their foreign minister over to Beijing just before this Trump summit, but they want to allow Iranian, Chinese tankers to get through the Strait of Hormuz with Iranian oil. Now, that's a violation of all the sanctions, and my hope is we don't permit that. And it never seemed to come up directly, but Iran. I mean, after all, China's been the banker and financier of Iran for many, many years by buying 90% of their oil exports, and that's given them the money to do all the mischief they've done on nuclear weapons and missiles and terrorism and so forth. I'm hoping we keep those sanctions in place. In fact, the whole blockade should be kept in place.
100%. It should be put in place, and the bombing would expand the blockade, and it would further degrade their ability to start building nukes again and missiles and supporting their terrorist friends abroad. And look, it's no surprise the Chinese need the oil. I think it's one reason the president's been so reticent to destroy the production facilities in Iran, because the Chinese will buy it from any Iranian regime. They'll buy it from the mullahs. They'll buy it from the crown prince if Pahlavi goes back, the Shah's son. They'll buy the oil from anyone. But right now they're getting a huge discount because they're busting sanctions. And so why American consumers and European consumers pay market price for oil, Chinese consumers are paying 20% less because they're buying black market sanctioned oil, kind of like blood diamonds. So it's no surprise the Iranians want to go back to selling the Chinese oil, but not letting any other oil get to the strait to go to anyone else. Don't let Saudi oil, don't let Qatari oil, don't let Kuwaiti oil get through. Just let Iranian oil get through. I'm not going to agree to that.
All right. Ambassador Robert O'Brien, great friend, mentor, former National Security Advisor. He's now the chairman of American Global Strategies. Great update. Great update. Lots cooking on that Iranian front. It may happen very soon. Folks, I'm Kudlow. We're going to take a break and do some stock market work on the other side. Please stick around.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, yesterday wasn't a fabulous stock market day, but the market has been roaring. And we're still running not quite 50,000 on the Dow, but the S&P 500, 7408, and that sort of sets the tone. That's the basic index, still record-breaking. A little bit of interest rate jitters. We'll talk about that. We have a new Fed chairman coming in. We'll talk about that. Let's see. The 10-year note is up to 460, up 24 basis points. That's a pretty big increase. Yesterday, up 11. Anyway, let's see what our experts are saying. Jack Bouroudjian, chairman of SmartX Data. Jim Iuorio, CEO of JI Financial Strategies. Two shrinking violets. I'm sure there's no opinions here. So, Jim Iuorio, let's start with you. Let's go to bonds. Everybody's talking about bonds. Front page of the Wall Street Journal. Global sell-off in bonds. Now, some people in the media are talking about the Fed's going to raise interest rates, which I think would be nutty. But anyway, what's happening here? Why is this going on all of a sudden?
I love when we start on something we agree with. The Fed tightening would be idiotic. The Fed tightening for a supply shock caused inflation will do absolutely nothing. It would be a silly thing to do. Now, the movement we've seen in long-run bonds, I think there's some troubling aspect to it. And I know it was a global sell-off, but it was led by us. And our 10-year yields going to 4.6, I think is indicative of the market saying, because there's no way they're worried about inflation. 10-year break-evens are still 2.5%. They're not worried about inflation in 10 years. That's not why they're selling bonds. I think they're selling bonds because they realize we had a lot of bonds to sell before this conflict even began, and that's now another, I just had that note. How much it's costing per day? 1.8 billion per day for the war. So I think the market is saying, if they're going to have to sell a bunch of bonds, we don't want to buy them, and I think that's a big deal. Now we'll say how that. And yesterday you said the stock market traded poorly because of the bond market, and I agree with you 100%. But I think there's a lot of things. 3 weeks ago when we were on the show, I was bullish. Now I think there's a 4 to 6% correction, and that's just based on math. When the NASDAQ gets so far ahead of its 50-day exponential moving average, meaning sentiment is way high, it usually portends a correction to come. But again, overall, I'm pretty positive on the economy still, particularly if we can get rid of this Iran thing sooner the better.
Yeah, I mean, you got good profits, good productivity,
and the labor market didn't fall apart like everyone was saying it was gonna 6 weeks ago.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of real good, but again,
good jobs.
The caveat is oil.
Well, what's a little gasoline between friends?
For you and me, nothing. For 60% who don't own assets, they might be second wind a little bit, which I don't like.
Well, I do feel their pain, Jack Bouroudjian. I mean, I understand that. By the way, I do want to make a minor correction to what Jim Iuorio just said. This is not a supply shock for the U.S. We have plenty of oil, natural gas, gasoline. It's a supply shock for other countries, Europe, for example, Asia, China. It's not like the 70s. I mean, but you've got a big price adjustment because we do pay the world price. But, I wouldn't care. I mean, you can, listen, we all grew up with the long gas lines in 79 and 80. We remember that. That was a supply shock. You couldn't get any gasoline because we had terrible regulatory policies and energy policies and just about every other policy before Reagan got in. But that's why I understand the bond thing, Jack. I don't know. You think it's going to go that far? You think? I mean, the 30 years at 5.12, so that's very exciting. People are hyperventilating about that. But I don't know. I could get in the mood to buy bonds if I ever did such a thing.
Well, I think we got to take a step back here. This market, when Jim and I were on about a month ago, the market had just made a low down around the 6350 level in the S&P. We've rallied 17% since then, all right? And what happened to crude? It spiked over $100 in WTI. What does that tell us? It tells us that the stock market could not care less about what is happening in the crude market right now. I mean, that's important to keep in mind. And the fact that we broke yesterday 92 points is just indicative of the levels that we're at. Look, we're all old enough to remember the crash in 87. That was a 92-point break back in 1987, and that was the crash. And today, it's nothing more than a 1.24% sell-off. So I think we have to really take that all in stride, especially in the wake of the velocity of the move that we just experienced. Now, you hit on something, Larry, and that is earnings. Look, this market is still making money. This AI story is not something that's a fad. This is something that is generational. We're seeing it. Look, the CME the other day came out and announced these compute futures. Why? Because there are trillions that need managing risk. And we talk about this almost every time I'm on the show. That's what's driving this market. The bonds, and this is something that is more like Jim's area of expertise. I was more of an equity guy and Jim was a bond guy, but I've always seen the bond market and the stock market linked, especially when we start to see asset allocations. When we start to see money come into stocks at this velocity, it's usually coming from someplace. Well, where's it coming from? It's coming from the bond market in many cases. You see that almost tick-for-tick sell-off you did over the course of the last 6 weeks, where we saw stocks going up and bonds going down. That's indicative of a large strategic asset allocation. And let's see, it could be the beginning of something huge. It also tells me one other thing, Larry, all right? It tells me that if we did not have this Iran story, this market would be significantly higher. And I'm talking maybe about 10 to 20% higher than where it is right now.
That's
so
coming.
That tells you,
it's
and
coming.
That tells you where we could go. Yeah.
It's coming. Have patience. It's coming. Trump's back in Washington, D.C., and he has some unfinished business to deal with, okay? And it's going to have something to do with the Strait of Hormuz, without any question. I don't know what...
a little bit of disruption in the short term is worth saving the devastation in the long term. I think we've all agreed on that. And there's other things happening which are very, very strange. The UAE leaving OPEC, these pipelines that are basically making the Strait of Hormuz, a moot point. I mean, these are things that are happening as we're speaking. So, over the bullets are coming out of the gun.
By the way...
First of all, we've destroyed the gun, and now whatever bullets are left, we're destroying.
By the way, just as a fun aside, UAE leaving OPEC, as it turns out, we've learned that the Saudis and the Kuwaitis and the Qataris and the Emirates have all been bombing Iran. How cool is that? I mean, really, really, how cool is that? Strike back. I mean, we didn't know this. We were sort of, Iran was bombing them, which was stupid. So Iran bombed them, so they turned off all their all the Iranian, IRGC bank accounts to Scott Bessent at the Treasury, who promptly seized them. But now it turns out those boys have been fighting back. I like that a lot. I just really love that. Just as an aside, you made me think of that.
Can I add something to what you guys saying about the oil thing, too? It's because I fully believe that in a year's time, oil is going to be about $50 a barrel. And what I base that on is UE leaving. UE's capacity, total capacity is 4 million barrels a day, and they've only been allowed to produce 2.5.
Yeah.
As soon as they increase, which is why they're leaving, other people are going to increase as well. But the problem is, we all have to admit that if this lingers another 3 or 4 months, it could reflect in the midterms, and then all of a sudden the agenda that is working and would work over time might have a hurdle. Is that a bad thing to say? Does that make Larry mad or no?
No. I mean, we'll say 3 or 4 months ahead is an eternity. 3 weeks.
Amen.
3 weeks. Where is the, Jim Iuorio, where is the 6-month futures contract for WTI and the 12-month? Where was it? It was about...
They've gone up. It's flattened. I'll get it for you. Let's check another question. I don't have it in front of me. I hate when you do this to me.
I think it's 85 and 77, but it might be higher.
Yeah, it's gone up.
There's backwardation in that market, Jimmy. You know what I mean? They're definitely looking at it.
But your point, the other point you made, though, is very interesting. I had seen reports the UAE could produce as much as 5 million barrels a day, and the others are going to fight back. The Saudis and the Kuwaitis and so forth, right? Because they don't want to lose market share.
Yeah.
So you're right. The price decline could be even faster. That's a very good. Listen,
don't forget Venezuela too, guys. Remember, Venezuela is going to come back online, and that is really going to alter the oil markets globally. I mean, you could see it coming.
When's since we're deep into the weeds on energy, when does the Guyana stuff kick in, or is it already kicking in?
Oh, that's Jack, that one. You stumped me twice with it's the Guyana story. I'm looking at Iran.
Well, Chevron paid a fortune to John Hess to buy the rights to Guyana.
Right, and this is all a very big deal. You've hit it on the head. There's a lot of things falling into place in this oil story that's going to make it. It's going to flip from being inflationary, which again, longer term it can't be inflationary because it's taking money out of people's pockets. But it's going to go to disinflationary, and then join the AI story and the immigration story as being somewhat disinflationary, and rates are going to be significantly lower in a year.
And then the other point is, just as another modest correction, we may be having 4% economic growth in the second quarter, according to the Atlanta Fed GDP now. But whatever, we're going to be running 3 to 4% growth, which is actually going to reduce the budget deficit, and that's going to reduce the amount of bonds sold in the marketplace.
The market doesn't agree with that right now. They're telling you they're a little bit concerned. You give me that point, right?
The market, yes.
Yes.
Well, who listens to the market? I mean, wait a second.
Me and Jack.
We're free. We're free market people here, so we do listen.
But the bond market's concerned, Jim, about, if you think about it, about a new Fed chief. Every time we have seen a new Fed chief, the market's tested that chief. All right, and now we got Kevin Warsh, who's battle tested. I mean, I'll give him that much. And look, we could not have a better guy in there. But every now and then, you get the bears out there. This is when they'll come at the Fed chief. So let's see what kind of strength we have.
What are they going to do? Like with guns, or how are they going to come out?
You know what? You see bond vigilantes come out of the woodwork. That's usually when we see them, Larry. When we see a new Fed chief come out. And the real question is who wins that battle. And right now, over the course of the next month or so, let's see. It's going to be a tug of war, and a lot of it is going to be headline driven.
Jack? Do you worry, either of you guys, that if bond yields, if 10-year goes to about 4.8, then the Fed steps back in and reinstitute, of course it's not called QE, and starts buying bond again? I think that would be a tremendous mistake, and I do think it's a possibility if bond yields keep flipping around.
Won't. Kevin won't let it happen.
Kevin Warsh won't do that.
Kevin won't do it. QE is, to the extent it was whatever it was, monetary. He's not going to do that. He's just not going to do that. I think that he's going to try to stop the crazies on the FOMC from raising rates.
Good.
That's going to be
that's inappropriate right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't raise rates. Just chill out for a while. All right. Let's us chill out for a while. We got to take a big break. Jack Bouroudjian, SmartX Data, Jim Iuorio, JI Financial Strategies. Where's the restaurant? We'll talk restaurants when we get to the other side of the break. I'm still Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So we've got Chicago's leading restaurateur, Jim Iuorio, CEO of JI Financial Strategies. And we've got Jack Bouroudjian, chairman of SmartX Data. How are the restaurants doing, Mr. Iuorio?
So it's really interesting. The trends this year have been, it's like a value migration, and that's shown up in two different places. One, like the real high-end places, people are starting to substitute lower. But that's not the interesting part. The most interesting part is fast food prices went up so fast, so quickly that people are gravitating up to casual, to casual sit-down dining. And our place, my restaurant, is right kind of in the sweet spot. People who've dialed back from fancy and up from fast food are going to our places. But there's definitely a bit of a value move and some changes this year because of the inflation, I believe.
Yeah, food prices have gone up, not near as much as energy prices, but you do have the fertilizer problem, Jack Bouroudjian.
Yeah, well, that's the one part of the commodity story that's the unknown. In fact, that's what's throwing kind of a big hole in everybody's budget. So I think, again, it's temporary. We know that. This is something that isn't going to last. But more importantly, I think it's also making these supply chains look for alternatives. We realized that there were certain things that we were still very dependent on that were coming out of that Persian Gulf. And now all of a sudden we're starting to realize there might be other ways and workarounds. And I think that that's very important. So, but before I do leave, I want to say one thing. I'm ashamed to say I've never been to Jim's restaurant, but
Please.
I understand it's probably, without a doubt, the best cheeseburger in the northern Illinois area. That's what I've been told. Okay.
Thank you, Jack.
I was just going to ask if you'd ever been to any of his restaurants.
You know what? Unfortunately, I've got a wife that likes to cook, so I like to stay home and eat her cooking.
Jack's cousin is a regular there, so we talk about. Jack has often talked about at my restaurant.
I'm not going to ask what they say. That's beyond the scope of this radio show. Can I say, CBOE, I just found this, the Nigerians have got me looking at VIX. VIX, even after yesterday, VIX is 18. Isn't that a low reading, like not to worry reading?
Absolutely. That and gold are telling you not to worry. If gold were spiking back up over $5,500 and we saw the VIX at 23 or 25, I'd say, yeah, we got something to worry about. But these are market indicators that are telling you, you know what, take it easy, take a deep breath. All right, the sell-off was nothing more than a bull market.
that if VIX goes too low, the fact that nobody's worrying makes us worry more, right? So I think it's at a nice level at 18. It's a little higher, on an average basis than it was the last couple of years, which is fine. And I think that it should be, if it's higher in the shorter term, that makes the long-term rally more durable.
Actually, gold has had a bad war. Gold's done very poorly in this war.
No, that's because there's no fear. There's no fear like there used to be. And same with crypto. I mean, you're not looking at those markets that should be running in these conditions.
By the way, Scott Bessent has seized all the crypto from the Revolutionary Guard and all of the crazy Nazi people. Good for Scott Bessent. Gentlemen, thank you. Jack Bouroudjian, appreciate it. Jim Iuorio, ditto. Folks, we'll take a break and do some money in politics with Liz Peek and Steve Moore on the other side. Please stick around. I'm Kudlow.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So we got a whole bunch of things to talk about, money and politics. Maybe more money, more politics than money, but we'll see. Anyway, Liz Peek is here, fabulous Fox News contributor and syndicated columnist. And there's a chance Steve Moore will show up. We have an APB out for him. Who knows? So, Liz, just you and me. Just you and me. So I went, we did APB. We did Steve Moore, my God.
I am here.
Oh, very kind of you. WABC radio host of More Money, which pops up on many of these same radio stations right after this show. So I just want to read you. I just found this. I was thumbing through the New York Post, my favorite. Kamala Harris, all right? Big favorite of both of yours, I know. So she was on this podcast or something, Win with Black Women podcast. And she said that Democrats need to reconsider radical positions ahead of the 2026 midterm elections, including abolishing the Electoral College and packing the Supreme Court. By the way, there's nothing particularly new about that. Then Harris also suggested statehood for Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., and fighting back against Republican-led states' redistricting efforts, blah, blah, blah. So now then I was thinking, Liz, the redistricting, the Virginia Democrats, so their state Supreme Court threw out their redistricting plan. So then the Virginia Democrats, it wasn't good enough, so they took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court threw out their redistricting plan, or they threw out the appeal on the redistricting plan. So that leads me to wonder, first of all, I don't know, maybe Democrats won't even listen to the federal Supreme Court. But aren't Republicans winning the redistricting battle pretty handily? And isn't this going to have some positive impact for the midterms?
Well, I think the calculus is now that they've picked up or will be picking up 7-8 seats, something like that. Virginia was supposed to counteract Texas by giving Democrats 4 or 5 seats and by basically making the Democrat advantage there 11-1 instead of 6-5. So, Supreme Court has ruled it out. Of course, Democrats are furious, even though, Larry, they broke the rules. I mean, they didn't go about it in the way they were supposed to go about it. So the Supreme Court even refused to hear it, and there was no dissent on that. So it pretty much tells you it was a lost cause. But I really object to the idea, and you see it in the paper from all sides of the spectrum over and over again, that Donald Trump started this redistricting push. He didn't. It started in New York. Talk to Claudia Tenney or Nicole Malliotakis about it. They tried to get rid of Nicole Malliotakis' seat by completely redrawing the lines of the Staten Island district that she represents to include a lot of minority voters. I mean, that's about as blatant as you can get. And New York and my other states have voted, New York voters have weighed in time and time again to say they don't want the state redistricted except by an independent commission. That's supposed to be how it's done. So Democrats lost on that, but Trump isn't an idiot. He saw that they were going to try again and again, which is what they've done. So he went to Texas and say, hey, guys, why don't we do your state? Because that is not necessarily representative of the breakdown politically of your state, and it worked. I mean, they went through the process legally the way it's meant to be done, and they work. So now you have this extra element of various aspects of the Voting Rights Act being tossed overboard by the Supreme Court, and I think rightly so, as you know, the head of the court, John Roberts, has said, if you want to end discrimination, end discrimination.
Right.
And that's what they have done.
That's the key
point. Now you have 3 or 4 more seats in Louisiana and various other southern states, which are going to come to the Republicans, presumably. Yeah. So anyway, I don't think Democrats have much to squawk about, but squawk they will.
John Yoo, you know, a lawyer from UCal Berkeley, of all places, but he's a great conservative law professor. He's just said, you know, talking about John Roberts and the Supremes, their goal is to basically take race out of all this, everything, redistricting, affirmative action, you know, colleges and universities. That's the originalist position, or it should be the originalist, the constitutionalist position. Just take race out, which I think is a great goal. Now, Steve Moore, if you're still with us,
I'm here.
I just want a word on Kamala Harris. All right, Kamala Harris. She's back. She thinks she's running for president. How good would that be if Kamala Harris was the Democrat? Can you imagine? Right.
I'm going to write her a check.
I'm with you, buddy. I mean, I don't think I'm allowed to, but if I were, Judy, saintly wife, can write a nice check. I can't. But you know, it's really quite amazing that she's still kicking around, and the whole crowd of them, Pritzker and her and Newsom, and I'm sure I'm missing Bouroudjian. I mean, really? Is that's what this country has come to? Holy cow! It's just hard. I don't know. It's hard to believe.
Well, look, it's an indication of the radical left-wing takeover of the Democratic Party. And I think it's really important for Democrats to lose again in 2028. They probably lost the last 3 presidential elections. And remember what happened in the Reagan era, Larry, where Ronald Reagan ran against Jimmy Carter and won 41 states, and then they ran Walter Mondale against him, and he only won 49 states. And then they said, well, we'll get him in 1988, and of course we had a pretty weak candidate in George H.W. Bush, but he still beat Michael Dukakis. And finally, the Democrats said maybe we should move to the middle, and they very smartly nominated Bill Clinton, and they won. And it's important this is a very, very dangerous movement in the Democratic Party, what you were talking about, getting, all of these things about getting rid of the Electoral College, make Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico a state, and just evade all of the rules that we've been put in place for 250 years is very scary. And it's this kind of situational ethics that the Democrats have that might makes right. And if we get into power, since we are morally superior than Republicans, we can do whatever we want.
It's well said. The Reagan, you're right, it was Reagan, Bush. Bush was the weakest at the tail end, but he still won. Well, he basically won going away against Dukakis, who actually had a lead at one point. So let me raise another point, and this is a good money politics. J.D. Vance, very actively now, launching, running, executing this waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption, which I think is going to endear him to a lot of voters in both parties, for example. And I suppose it strengthens his presidential hand, but I'm just more interested in the substance of it. This is a great issue for the GOP. They should push it now in the midterm elections. Can we claw back? How much savings can we have, Steve? That kind of thing. Because
it's huge.
It's huge.
And I agree with you. It's a great issue for J.D. Vance to advance, and he's done a great job with this. And all Americans are against waste in government, except the hard left, which, by the way, they're not even against getting rid of the fraud. That's
I know.
That part of it. They want the fraud.
It's a great platform. Larry, I think it's a great program for Republicans for many reasons, including the fact that it really shows why having big government take over more and more of the public activities is really dangerous because there is not efficient oversight. Money goes missing, like a lot of money goes missing, and it just sort of essentially leads to corruption. I mean, if you consider socialism a failed program in Venezuela, Cuba, and other places, it's because partly of the corruption of that program. And you could just sort of, there's a connect the dots. Light socialism also has light corruption, and we're seeing it in Minnesota, we're seeing it in other states, California, New York, et cetera, where they just don't care. They don't really care, and it's corruption that leads to politicians turning a blind eye to activities, which seems like what happened in Minnesota, where it's really impacting spending and tax policy and all kinds of things. So it's profound. It's not just a throwaway activity. This is a very big deal. And by the way, I credit Elon Musk with having kind of started this ball rolling. And as you know, I was hugely excited about Doge. I'm hugely excited about what Vance is doing. It should be done. Even the Biden administration said every agency should be looking at where the money's going missing because, you know, there's just not enough oversight. So kudos to the government for focusing on this.
You know, Steve, heaven forbid the Republicans should have some kind of clawback deficit reduction platform. Imagine that. Deficit reduction. Reduce federal spending. I mean, it just it's fraud and it's corruption. But I think, you know, if you put it into more traditional macro politics, it's, you know, the size and scope of government, Liz is right, big government socialism endemically breeds corruption. No question about that. But
I would just go one step further from what Liz was saying. I mean, I want to see these people taken away in handcuffs and put in jail. I mean, they're stealing. This is robbery of them. And look, you guys start going into these, fake, daycare centers and so on where there are no kids, and you take some of these people out in handcuffs. That'll be a deterrent. And it's amazing to me the Democrats, as I said before, they are defending the fraud. They think the problem is the whistleblowers, not the fraud people. That's how bad it has become. And remember, by the way, going back to Bill Clinton and even Barack Obama, and what did Bill Clinton have, like, make government work, all these, and some of them were, they were once for big government, they're for big and bad government.
How about...
can I say one other thing on this? There is a perception. I think there's a public perception that there's corruption everywhere. They look at Congress where all these people are making, like Nancy Pelosi, so much money, and it's inconceivable she's not trading on inside information. They look at government programs and they're riddled with fraud. It's a very demoralizing thing to the country to have all this stuff going on. I think really setting... no one's above the law here. I mean, setting yourself up to be the champion of the truth and cleaning this stuff out, I think that's a winning position.
It is, but you got to institutionalize it, Steve, politically. In other words, you got to figure out a way. So you lay it out the way Elon Musk laid it out a year ago, and it was extremely popular. Liz is right. So now JD's come back with it, and it's going to be popular, I assume. But there's got to be a way to claw back. You're talking about jail. Okay, I appreciate that point. But fiscally speaking, you've got to figure you got to figure out a way to claw it back and make that and talk about it in those terms. See, because it has a way. It's like an electronic wave. It comes and goes. All right, so with Elon, everyone loved what Elon was doing. $500 billion plus. I remember I interviewed him almost a year ago, a little more than a year ago, and he talked about $500 billion. What happened to that? What happened to that? $500 billion over 10 years or times 10 years? Where? I don't want JD's thing to do this. We vent our anger. You throw them in jail, and then what? We still have a $2 trillion budget deficit. Follow me?
Yeah. Well, I would. I don't know if you saw Liz and Larry, the really, really good editorial in the Wall Street Journal this morning about California's fraud.
Yes.
And they're covering for everything, under Medicaid, baselifts and all this stuff that has nothing to do with health.
People are walking out of hospices healthier than they went in.
Yeah, exactly. And the
miracle.
Miracle, right? And look, there's the General Accounting Office, which is the federal government auditor, found $200 billion in fraud in food stamps and Medicaid, and that's just the fraud they found. So that probably means the numbers.
And they all drove Rolls Royces to the food stamp place.
It makes people mad. It does make people. It makes me mad. I mean, that stuff. Whoever it was buying Lamborghinis and stuff.
Yeah,
good Lord. But they set this stuff up in New York State. We've all heard the ads for the last many years about if you know someone who needs care, you can sign up to take care of them. Well, it could be anybody. I mean, I think the standards are so ridiculously lax that is just in and of itself an invitation to fraud.
All right. Well, if you know someone that needs a Bentley, please dial in right here. I got to take a quick break. We're rocking and rolling. Liz Peek and Steve Moore. Steve's show's coming up right after this show on most of these same radio stations. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
By the way, just a wee bit of breaking news. Israel Defense Forces killed chief Hamas architect of October 7th terror attacks, which is awfully good news. Awfully good news. Anyway, we're here with Liz Peek, Fox News contributor, and Steve Moore, of his many credits, but his radio show, More Money, cooks up right after this show on most of these same radio stations. So we were talking about Kamala Harris and others, and then we got to J.D. Vance's good work on fraud. Steve Moore, what's the deal with Ron DeSantis? You think is he going to run for president too, or is he going to go into the cabinet? I don't know where. What's happening with him? We lost. I'll ship it right over to Liz. I don't know what happened to Steve Moore.
So here's what I'm actually in Florida right now, and I have been down here several times this spring, kind of canvassing people who know Ron DeSantis very well and who backed him pretty aggressively in the last primary cycle, whenever that was. They like him. Think he's an extraordinary governor. They think his political skills are not up to the test and that he will never be nominated for the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably right, Larry. They all know he can't work a room. He doesn't remember donors' names. I mean, it's stupid stuff, but it matters.
Yeah, that exactly jives with stuff that I've heard and actually experienced. I know, for example, a very big donor, whom you also know will remain nameless, but you know that person too. Anyway, I think they donated, it was either $50,000 or $100,000, but could never get a call back, and tried many times to get a call back and talk to him about some issues. Kellyanne Conway said this during the Republican primary season in 2023 and early 2024 before Mr. Trump got it. But he doesn't, you're right, he doesn't know how to work a room. He never argued the economic stuff, Liz. Remember the Wall Street Journal editorial, that 14.8 is different than zero. City and state in New York, 14.8% tax. City and state in Miami, 0. And that was also, it was a great editorial the Journal wrote. How Florida GDP is faster than New York, and Florida has more population and half the size of the budget. He had stuff to brag about on the economy, but DeSantis never seemed to. He got all hung up with Walt Disney and, but I'll just say social issues in general, never the economy.
I think that's true. We had him speak, meaning National Review, had him speak at a meeting in Palm Beach in November, and it was all about the economy, and it was very, very good. People said it was the best speech he'd ever given, and it gave some supporters, hope that he might actually run. But, Larry, I think it'd be it would be awesome to see him come in as Attorney General. And also, there has been talk that he could be on the Supreme Court. He is a lawyer. He is an immensely smart and measured person. I think he would be a very, very good person in that role. If an opening comes up, I'm sure he will be considered.
You know, that's interesting, though, the November speech you referred to. Because that was I said so many times during 2023 when everyone was saying how strong DeSantis was, and he was strong coming off a re-election, but he never, ever talked about the economy. And I said he's getting too tied up with Walt Disney and all the punishments, you know, and he had a good case. So you're saying he's learned, or he's now more adept on it.
Oh, I think, and I think as this huge migration of wealth has taken place from blue states to red states, and Florida, obviously one of the great beneficiaries of that, you know, it has become a bigger talking point. I mean, you're right. New York City has a $125 billion budget, bigger than the entire state of Florida. Florida has 24 million residents. New York City has 8. Right. I mean, that is sort of, in a nutshell, what's wrong with New York and what's right about Florida. They've kept their spending under control. But it's not just that. When they had hurricanes in Florida, he fixed what was broken. I mean, he's an amazing governor. So I hope he has a spot going forward. I think he's terrific.
Liz Peek, Fox News contributor extraordinaire. Thanks ever so much. Steve Moore's show comes up after this show on most of these same stations, even though he's not here. I'm Kudlow. Be back next weekend.
Thanks for listening to The Larry Kudlow Show. You can hear The Larry Kudlow Show Saturday mornings at 10. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?